Planning Commission. At this time, we ask that you turn off all pagers, cell phones, or electronic signaling devices. The agenda for today's hearing is located in the council chamber lobby. Staff reports and maps for the City Planning Commission hearings will be available online approximately 1 week prior to the public hearing. To access this information, log on to www.norfolk.gov/planning. If you wish to speak on an item on today's agenda, you must fill out a request form with a staff member located in the council chamber lobby. We normally hear the items in the order in which they are listed on the agenda. The Planning Department staff will introduce each item by stating the type and purpose of the application and the location of the property. A staff member will deliver a presentation on each item, followed by a recommendation on each application to be considered at this hearing. Following the staff presentation, the commission will hear from the proponents and the opponents, if there are any. Anyone who has signed in to speak will be called by the chair. They should approach the podium, state their name and mailing address. The speaker should speak directly to the commission and not to the audience. Remarks will be limited to 3 minutes each. However, the applicant's time will not be limited. After all proponents and opponents have been heard, the commission will allow rebuttal first from proponents, then opponents. The total time for rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes each. At the conclusion of the hearing on each item and after considering all information presented, the commission will take action on the matter. Action on each matter by the commission will be to recommend approval or denial by majority vote. The statement of the motion in the affirmative by a member of staff is a matter of voting procedure and in no way indicates the recommendation of the staff or consensus of the commission. Following the action by the commission on the matter, a written recommendation will be made to City Council, except for those applications where the decision of the Planning Commission is final. Anyone who attends the commission public hearing for a specific item will be notified by the City Clerk's office of the date on which the City Council will consider the application. May we have the roll, please?
Dr. Whibley?
Here.
Mr. Young is absent. Mr. Wells?
Here.
Mr. Pendleton?
Here.
Ms. Van?
Here.
Mr. Bateman?
Here.
Ms. Sutterth?
I am here.
Madam Chair, staff would make a recommendation to continue item number 2, the short-term rental limitation overlay, to the end of the agenda after the new business items.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay.
Before taking up the items on today's agenda, we will consider the following requests for withdrawals and continuances. The following item is to be continued from the August 27th, 2026 public hearing agenda to the September public hearing agenda. Regular item number 5, DeRecan, for conditional use permits for restaurant and sale of alcoholic beverages on premise, sale of alcoholic beverages off premises, and live entertainment. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Young is absent. Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
Ms. Sutterth?
Aye.
First item on today's continued agenda is Macondo. The following conditional use permits at 2325 East Little Creek Road. Restaurant with extended hours, live entertainment, sale of alcoholic beverages on premises, and sale of alcoholic beverages off premises. The purpose of this request is to allow a restaurant to operate with extended hours, provide live entertainment, and sell alcohol for on and off premises consumption. You're losing a lot of credit for doing that for so long. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The site is located on the south side of East Little Creek Road near Halpern Drive in the Lake Whitehurst West neighborhood. The proposed use is consistent with NFK 2050, which designates the site as corridor mixed use and sustained suburban, where commercial is a primary use in the corridor mixed use place type and a secondary use in the suburban place type. Property is on CC, community commercial. In this district, you need a conditional use permit to have a restaurant with the sale of alcoholic beverages for on-premises consumption after 5 p.m., to sell alcoholic beverages for off-premise consumption, and to have live entertainment. And also to operate a restaurant operating after 11 o'clock p.m. in this district. Here's a picture of the site. Formerly operated as Lumpia, and the applicant is proposing significant renovations to the site. as shown here. In a previous iteration of this project, there was an outdoor stage that has been removed after discussions between the applicant and the nearby apartment complex to try to minimize some of that sound. Again, this is just their floor plan, but the site is conditioned to be improved as shown on this plan. So Olympia House previously operated from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and from 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. Friday and Saturday. The condo is requesting 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and 10 a.m. until 12 o'clock midnight Friday and Saturday. That would also be the hours they are requesting for their outdoor dining. Hours for the sale of alcoholic beverages on and off premise is going to be the same as their hours of operation from a condo. Olympia House did not have entertainment, but the hours for entertainment, again, only inside this time, is the same hours as they're operating, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, and 10 a.m. till 12 o'clock midnight Friday and Saturday. For live entertainment, they're requesting live band, karaoke, comedian, and speaker. And the capacity is larger than Olympia House previously was. Most of those seats are in the outdoor dining area. 116 seats indoors, 78 seats outdoors, for a total capacity of 217. Staff is recommending approval of the CUP request. The use does align with NFK 2050. The site is located in an area with similar uses. We're going to get site improvements, and as we do for all applications with entertainment operating for the first time, they have a 2-year expiration as one of the conditions. I stand by for any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Rob. We do have the applicants here. John Rizzo, would you like to add anything to the presentation? No. And then also Christian Ortiz, would you like to add anything? Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicants?
I do have one question. I'm not sure if it's for the applicant. Is regarding the food truck that's operating now?
Who might be able to answer that? Mr. Ortiz or Mr. Rizzo? The food truck? Would you come up and thank you, Mr. Ortiz. If you would, your name and your address, and then we have a question about the food truck.
Yeah, my name is Christian Ortiz, 6507 Monroe Place, Norfolk, Virginia.
Thank you for coming out. I was wondering if that was the other restaurant, Lupia, or is that you operating the food truck in front?
That's our food truck, yes.
Okay, and that is going to cease as soon as you start to operate?
That is correct.
Okay, very good. That was-
Any other questions?
Mr. Bateman, just to clarify,
Okay.
not knowing the applicant's operations, as the site plan shows, that would be the driveway to access the parking, so that could, the food truck, if it were to be parked, could not be parked in that area. It would have to be parked around behind. It would be permitted to be parked in
sure.
the back. Just wanted to make sure.
I
that
was just curious if it was going to continue to operate after they open the restaurant. Okay, thank you.
Any
That
other
was it.
questions for Mr. Ortiz? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
Motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit application request as conditioned in the staff report. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton? Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
Ms. Sutter?
Aye. We'll make that recommendation to City Council. Thank you for coming out.
Next item on our Architecture Review Board agenda is 1283 Little Bay Avenue, 9638 13th View Street, 9634 13th View Street, and 9630 13th View Street for the construction of 5 townhouses in the Coastal Character District.
Good afternoon. So the applicant's proposing to construct 5 new townhouses in the Willoughby neighborhood on a vacant corner lot fronting Little Bay Avenue and 13th View Street. Because this property was formerly owned by NRHA and is being conveyed for private development, the project is subject to review by the Architectural Review Board per city code. So here's some site photographs. And this item did come before the board as a discussion item on August 10th, and the comments focused primarily on the right side elevation facing 13th View Street, and the applicant addressed those with revised drawings. And then here's some of the surrounding context. The proposed site plan. And then the proposed front elevation, and then the proposed left side elevation. So the townhouses will be 3.5 stories and alternate between 2 unit types, one with a smaller offset gable end clad in board and batten for all 3 stories, and a 2-story porch with no roof, and then a centered gable end with a roof 2-story porch. And then the proposed right side elevation and rear. The fenestration patterns are different on each side elevation due to the interior layouts. And the right elevation includes 4 windows on the first floor, 4 on the second floor, including 2 square windows flanking the interior fireplace, and then 3 on the 3rd floor, including a smaller bathroom window. And then here's a colored rendering. There are 3 proposed exterior colors, which will be laid out in the following order of Arctic White, Pearl Gray, Gray Slate, Pearl Gray, and Arctic White. And then here's colored renderings of the side elevation. For landscaping, the applicant plans to preserve the 2 existing live oaks along Little Bay Avenue, and the foundation plantings will be added along the front and right elevations, and then black tupelo trees will be planted at the rear of the property along the driveway. And the ARB recommended approval on a vote of 7-0. The proposed 5 townhouses align with the classic Tidewater coastal style described in the pattern book. And the pattern book also recommends that corner units have prominent facades along both the principal and side streets, and that townhouse developments have varied designs using 2 to 3 basic shapes, which this proposal has the 2 basic unit shapes repeated along the site's width, and the fenestration pattern on the right side helps give it a prominent facade, and the board found that this design is compatible with the surrounding area and the pattern book.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. It looks like we do have the applicant here, Edward Hewitt. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Hewitt? All right. Any discussion before we vote? Thank you.
Motion is to recommend approval of the applications as presented. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
Ms. Sutter?
Aye.
The next item on the agenda is 1,000 Botetourt Gardens for garden renovations.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This application is from the Friends of Fred Hewitt Center that leased the space that is city-owned at 1,000 Botetourt Gardens. As this is a city-owned property and they are proposing improvements that are exterior that will change how it appears, that is why it requires design review. The applicant has an overall concept plan for several different types of garden improvements, and they plan to accomplish this over many phases that will be funded as grant funds become available, and they have volunteer support in order to complete them. So the subject of this application specifically from the applicant was for a fence to enclose what will become a children's garden in what is in plan view, the upper right, so the northeast corner of the parcel. What is being exhibited on the screen right now is a concept plan. It may be subject to change depending on funding availability and things of that nature, but generally speaking, the children's garden will have child-friendly sensory plantings, places for outdoor story time and other programming, and natural play landscapes, as well as some paths throughout the center of it. At this time, the only physical improvement that will be made will be the enclosure of that area with a fence, which you can see here. Wood picket fence. It's going to match the one that's existing on the garden that's on the southeast corner. The ARB did vote to recommend approval of this, and as well as recommending the concept of the children's garden to you all today. With that recommendation, it would allow for some substantial conformance with the overall concept of the children's garden, while giving them flexibility to meet needs for funding for what they can actually put on the ground. If there was any substantial change, it would need to come back for design review, but the board felt that by recommending this, it would enable them to move forward with funding opportunities as they arose. It is a garden within a garden. So again, a unanimous recommendation to you all for these items as presented.
Any questions? All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
We do have the applicant here, Jennifer Dawn. Would you like to add anything to the presentation, or do we have any questions for Ms. Dawn? Thank you. All right, any discussion? I think we're ready to vote.
Motion is to recommend approval of the application, to recommend approval of the application as presented. Dr. Whibley.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton.
Aye.
Ms. Van.
Aye.
Mr. Bateman.
Aye.
Ms. Sutter.
Aye, thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is the City Planning Commission for a zoning ordinance text amendment to allow additional uses by conditional use permit and modify the development standards in the airport district. So the airport owns property both within the terminal complex outside of the terminal complex. The airport is currently closing one of the runways, and as a result of this closure, there's new development opportunities that are proposed by the airport that require some modifications to our zoning ordinance. There are 4 lots currently most impacted by the runway closure. Specifically for the zoning text amendment, we're looking at parcels, zones 2 and 3. In zone 2, hotels are permitted inside and outside the airport terminal complex. Restaurant is permitted, but it requires a CUP for alcohol or for entertainment. But only within the terminal complex can you have a conference center or banquet hall. The proposed amendment would be to allow conference center and banquet hall by conditional use permit outside of the terminal complex. For Zone 3, gas station is currently not allowed inside or outside of the terminal complex. Convenience store, ABC off-premises, and smoking and vaping are permitted by CUP both inside and outside, so all those uses that are accessory to a convenience and a gas station. The proposed text amendment would allow the gas station inside and outside the terminal complex by CUP as we have it everywhere else in the city. And finally, restaurants are selling alcohol in the terminal complex. The airport was in existence prior to the requirement of a conditional use permit for ABC on premises inside the terminal complex. So they're vested for that right. But as part of this amendment, we'd like to clarify that restaurants are allowed to operate in the airport district with alcohol, entertainment, and/or closing by 2 a.m. by right. Staff recommends approval of the zoning text amendment, which aligns with NFK 2050, which calls for supporting the airport's master planning efforts. Stand by for any questions.
Questions?
Madam Chair, may I add one additional piece of information just for the public's knowledge? There are other zones that were listed by the airport as potential development opportunities that are not zoned airport, and they are not affected by this text amendment. Those other 2 properties would need to go through a rezoning process, which would have public hearings associated with them, and none of these changes affect any of those exterior properties to what would be considered the core of the airport property.
Thank you. I think we're ready to vote.
Motion is to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Young? Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton? Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
Ms. Sutterth?
Aye.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is City Planning Commission for zoning ordinance text amendment to add window transparency requirements to the Riverview Pedestrian Commercial Overlay Zoning District.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So these are the 2 signed text amendments from last month's meeting, and they'll be voted on separately. The first one is the Riverview Pedestrian Overlay. Earlier this year in February, staff met with the Riverview Business Association. Discussions led to emails to understand their ideas and concerns, which ultimately led to development of this text amendment. Next point on this slide states the revision to the zoning ordinance would give business owners and inspectors clear guidance on when the front facade must remain transparent and when blinds or curtains may be used. Here we have 2 local examples of businesses using blinds and curtains that obstruct visibility into the interior, which could create potential safety concerns. The amended text will read as follows. During all hours of business operation, all glass portions of windows and doors along the street-facing front facade shall be maintained as transparent, as defined in Section 8.32, terms defined, and shall not be obscured with blinds or curtains except those necessary to block active sunlight. And since our last discussion 2 weeks ago, we've included the word active. The Riverview Business Association also raised concerns about the temporary signage allowed in their district. The current requirements are complicated, so we realized it was time to simplify them. As the slide states, the revision to the zoning ordinance would give business owners and inspectors clear guidance on how to calculate sign maximums. Staff suggested applying these changes to citywide establishment, maintaining visibility for public safety. The diagram on the left is a common one showing how storefronts are just often composed entirely of windows. And the image on the right is a local example of a business where signs obstruct the visibility into the interior, which could create potential safety concerns. And so as suggested, we've created some slides to show that there are some businesses that are close to compliance. Our goal is basically to demonstrate that this proposed standard is reasonable and achievable. especially since many large franchises are actually already close to compliance. So it would be just in these examples a matter of adjusting sizes. So for the auto zone, you can see that they have, those were measured to be less than 5 feet in its dimension. The signs on the underneath that are slightly wider but yet smaller could possibly be okay, as we consider that hole to be those first 3 a window, and then the one after it that is angled to be a separate window. Because in measuring that red divider, it's more than 4 inches wide. And then obviously on the other side, they left it open, so we're able to see that. And then that was another local business that appears to be in compliance currently. Most franchises are already in compliance. They are sent their own signs in order to advertise, and so this particular franchise was very close to compliance. This one, they did not have signs on either side. These were the only 5 that presented, but the one on the left would be considered too large because it's wider than the 5 feet. And so therefore, the amended text will read as follows. To support productive business operations while protecting the safety and welfare of inhabitants by ensuring adequate visibility and minimizing negative impacts on inhabitants, the following shall apply to all temporary and permanent window signs. No more than 1 window sign no larger than 15 square feet with a maximum dimension of 5 feet may be installed for every 10 feet of ground story building facade with no more than 5 signs permitted by business. No window sign may exceed 30% of the area in which it is installed. 3, for the purposes of this section, A, the area of the window shall be determined by including all areas of glazing not separated by frame or structural larger than 4 inches wide. B, any sign content not legible from the vehicular travel lanes of adjacent streets shall not be considered a window sign, however, shall meet the window transparency requirements of this section. And I'll stand by if you have any questions.
Questions?
Staff obviously recommends approval.
Thank you. I don't think we have any questions. You ready to vote? I believe so. Thank you.
Just to clarify,
Oh, please
it'll
do.
be 2 votes.
Yes.
1 vote for the Riverview pedestrian commercial overlay signage and 1 for the amendment to section 5.7 signs. The motion is to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment as presented. Dr. Whibley.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
I think you did a great job, very thorough, so thank you for taking that.
Mr. Pendleton.
Aye.
Ms. Van.
Aye.
Mr. Bateman.
Aye.
Ms. Sutter.
Aye.
And then the motion is to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment to section 5.7 as presented. Dr. Whibley.
Aye.
Mr. Wells. Mr. Pendleton.
Aye.
Ms. Van.
Aye.
Mr. Bateman.
Aye.
Ms. Sutter.
Aye. I also agree. Great job. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is City Planning Commission for the following applications. A zoning ordinance text amendment to create the industrial mixed-use overlay zoning district, and B, a change of zoning from IL Industrial Light to IL and Industrial Mixed-Use Overlay at 1311 Redgate Avenue.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Let's get to the slide here. Yes, so as Rob mentioned, these are 2 items. One is the amendment, the text amendment to create this new industrial mixed-use overlay, and then the change of zoning at a specific property in the Chelsea neighborhood to apply the new overlay. And it, again, it creates this new industrial mixed-use overlay, and really the goal with this new district or new overlay is to allow for more small-scale commercial uses in our light industrially zoned properties, such as light, retail, small-scale retail, personal services, things that we think really can coexist with those light industrial activities and properties. And the origin of this, we as a staff had been, as part of our sort of ongoing work program, we're going to look at the industrial districts in general in the city, the zoning districts, and look at continuously evaluating those and seeing what tweaks we can make to kind of modernize certain things. So this actually was good timing for us to have some interest from the Chelsea Business Association to kind of kick this off. It really became a catalyst for this proposal. Really, they wanted to kind of wanted us to take a look at what small scale and commercial uses we could potentially add to the area specifically. And so kind of thinking about that as a staff and, tossing around a few different ideas and different paths we could go down with that. We were first one to schedule a input session, engagement session in the Chelsea neighborhood to get some input on, what, as you see here, what current uses they enjoy in Chelsea, to kind of take the temperature of, what is it about that area they currently enjoy, and then what uses they'd like to add to the area, so what things they'd like to maybe see more of in the future. And then, just take some kind of open comments as well, just anything that, maybe we didn't capture with those two questions. And so the themes you can see here, we really heard a lot about, the current walkability of Chelsea is, of course, a very common theme that we heard from the feedback. It certainly already has a mixture of uses, primarily in the kind of light commercial and industrial. There's heavy industrial there too. Of course, it's been there for some time. So the importance of retaining and maintaining that industrial character was really important for them. And supporting those existing long-term and even some of the shorter-term industrial users, both light and heavy, was definitely important. But I think wanting to see more of those kind of, and really the emphasis was on small scale and boutique retail and commercial services, service uses like barbershops, salons, that sort of thing. So these are all things that currently are not allowed in most of those districts, or the properties down there, except for the waterfront, are zoned light industrial. There are some commercial, but mainly it's light industrial. And that zoning district does not allow those retail or personal service businesses. And then finally, that it was important that parking was, that a lot of these properties did have some level of on-site parking, and that this wouldn't cause or exacerbate problems with industrial truck traffic and things like that. And there's obviously West Kent right adjacent to Chelsea, so just trying to be mindful of how allowing some additional commercial would affect the residential neighborhood, but also the existing kind of nature of industrial truck traffic. So just making sure we had our mind into safety in the area as well. So, as I mentioned, this creation of this overlay, it's what we tend to call a floating overlay district in the zoning ordinance. So we create it in the zoning ordinance. It becomes an option for property owners to opt into, and they can. So really, other than this one property that you'll see in just a second here, if any further sort of application of this overlay, property owners would have to agree to do that and rezone their property to sort of see these additional benefits of the overlay district. But we did want to just create it to begin with, and even though this effort started in Chelsea, our proposal is to not restrict it to the Chelsea area. We think this could be a really good option for other light industrial properties throughout the city. One that I think everyone thinks of is the Railroad District, but there are many others throughout the city that certainly could benefit from this, and areas that are also in close proximity to neighborhoods and residential districts that could maybe use these kind of additional retail and commercial amenities. So the proposal includes sort of an eligibility criteria. One is that the property must be zoned IL, so light industrial. That's the base zoning district, has to be that, and that our sort of proposal to help mitigate those parking and traffic concerns that we heard at the June 29th meeting in Chelsea was to require that if the property to be eligible to be rezoned to this overlay, to apply the overlay, they have to be able to provide one parking space per 850 square feet per building on the property. That's the parking ratio for our, we call it general industrial uses in our parking table. So that's where that number comes from. And, so we thought that was a very balanced approach, because it requires some level of on-site parking. It does not, it sort of supersedes this parking exemptions that we typically apply to existing buildings and properties. So those would not apply in this case. But so they have to have some level of on-site parking, but it's a pretty liberal parking requirement. It is not cumbersome. We felt that, using this ratio as opposed to the general commercial ratio did sort of still encourage these areas to remain walkable and not to have places be overparked. So we thought that's kind of where we landed on that. Those are just the only two eligibility criteria that properties would have to meet in order to be rezoned to the overlay. And then the other piece is that it would allow, if a property is rezoned to this new overlay, they could, any retail goods and personal service businesses, just in general, would be permitted by right up to 2,000 square feet. And then if they are over that, they have the option to apply for a conditional use permit. So that was really our way of, again, balancing some of those, the desires we heard at that meeting and with the concerns that we heard, and not just completely opening the doors in these light industrial areas, but to kind of to encourage some of these uses that we think, and that I think the community expressed as well, that they can support these areas that are already walkable, tend to have neighborhoods nearby. Some residents could walk or bike to these commercial establishments, but again, it's a smaller scale, which is really what we heard strongly. So. Still retaining a lot of the industrial, the opportunity for light industrial uses to move into these properties as well. And I mentioned, so as in addition to the creation of the overlay district, we did have a property owner at 1311 Redgate Avenue who is also part of that June 29th meeting. The property owner has agreed and signed the rezoning application to apply this new overlay district. So they will be the first property with this new district. And just locationally, it's on the south side of Redgate Avenue, right in the Chelsea area. It is zoned light industrial currently. And it's really the property has a mixture already of light industrial, commercial, and office uses. So it's a really ideal property for this new overlay district. And it has quite a bit of on-site parking already. So that's something that can be kind of rare in areas like these districts that are similar to this out there. So that was certainly positive for this new district. So that, of course, would allow for more commercial opportunity. It would not alter or change the existing permitted uses under the light industrial district. So those are all still permitted as they are currently in zoning ordinance, just adds these two additional uses. Again, up to 2,000 square feet by right, and then over 2,000, they can apply for a conditional use permit. And really that this corridor, already behaves much like a mixed-use environment again. So I think this property and a lot of others really lend themselves well to this new district. So we, probably expect to see, others, some interest from others, I'm sure, in the future, and we can sit down and have a conversation, see if it works for those properties as well. And we did a kind of a scan of different properties in the Chelsea area specifically. And another way that we landed on that 2,000 number square feet was that there were quite a bit of properties in that district zoned IL that had up to 2,000 square feet of square footage in the building and also had parking on site. So that's another way that we came up with that number. Also just mentioned we did work with our economic development team to see if that number was okay with them as well, and they confirmed that they're in agreement with that. That's an appropriate number. So, and then as with everything, we like to make sure that the proposals compliant or in alignment with the comprehensive plan, NFK 2050. And so with this really, this particular creation of this overlay district, just in general, really aligns with not just the future land use map that you see here, but really all of the pillars of the plan. And so starting with the future land use map, it's community mixed use. That's the place type in most of Chelsea, except for the waterfront properties there and more of the heavy industrial properties there in the area. It would add these neighborhood serving retail services uses, personal service uses, encourages the walkability again with the neighborhood nearby, and a lot of that existing activity you already see there, and promotes that kind of transitional character that we already are seeing in areas like Chelsea, but other areas certainly have the same place type and would be appropriate, I think, for this overlay as well. In the growing equitably pillar, which talks about housing and economic development, this, we see this as really being supportive of small businesses by, having those kind of small scale specialty or boutique retail kind of have that threshold of 2,000 square feet, expanding the access to everyday goods for those residents and businesses nearby. Again, kind of diversifying that land use that we see here and encouraging adaptive reuse too. So a lot of these existing buildings that could now have this opportunity to put some more small scale commercial uses in there, I think is another way of giving these buildings some life. For celebrating our community pillar, we, again, it's improving walkable neighborhood hubs, especially these hubs that are already existing, they're already very walkable, and it kind of strengthens that sort of the local identity, I think, in these areas as well. So this district, again, can, I think, help advance that. And then finally, connecting the city, our transportation pillar. We've talked a lot about walkability and bikeability, first and last mile access for these neighborhoods, folks that live nearby. And then, again, reducing, that pillar also talks a lot about improving safety and reducing conflicts with truck traffic and, freight movement. And so I think this, again, by requiring the parking, some level of parking on site, I think will help with reducing conflicts with the industrial and freight truck traffic. So just our recommendation, of course, is to approve both requests, the zoning text amendment and the rezoning request to apply the overlay. Overall, we see that this new overlay district is a really good implementation tool of NFK 2050, kind of enabling that mixed use growth in the appropriate areas. In this, in not just Chelsea, but any area, it can really preserve that industrial identity again, while adding those amenities that we mentioned, those commercial uses, kind of that gentle incremental change over time. Kind of think it'll help allow that and spur that. And really, again, transforming these older industrial areas into these kind of safer, more functional mixed-use corridors without this kind of larger scale redevelopment. So again, that balanced approach, I think, is another plus for this particular proposal. And of course, it's consistent with the community input that we heard on June 29th. But with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Perhaps the best example that lines in with your pillars.
Yeah.
It's great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it does.
Although I got one question.
Yes.
That might question that. So I'm all about adaptive reuse, and I think this is great. I agree with Mr. Wells. What if one of the residents or one of the property owners said, I wanted to do a residential above my commercial? To me, that's more commercial, multi-use, mixed use, and one of the best examples where we have residential and commercial all coexisting. And I know we have existing residential already in the ILs that I believe I was told would just be grandfathered. Would this overlay prevent anyone who wanted to go that route to institute some residential mix?
Yeah, the current text does not include adding residential yet. We wanted to start with this to mix the uses first to see how it impacted properties prior to switching to adding additional residential uses. Because then you would essentially be blending 3 districts together. And so there was some concern that was brought during Chris's public meeting that we had that there was some residential to be introduced right away. Although Chris did share with them that could be looked at in the future. But we wanted to take, as Chris mentioned, an incremental approach to try to make sure that we're not further impacting the reduction in industrial land in the city.
100% agree, and one of our pillars is generating additional living space, living capacity for the communities as well, so I think that maybe is a good next step.
Right,
So,
absolutely.
consider.
The area.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great
Yeah,
area
it's a great
for that
area.
type of use, I think, so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep, sure thing.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think we're ready to vote.
Motion is to recommend approval of the zoning ordinance text amendment and the change of zoning at 1311 Renegade Avenue. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton? Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
And Ms. Sutter?
Aye.
The next item on today's agenda is Elizabeth Kane for a conditional use permit to operate a short-term rental, vacation rental at 1229 Hillside Avenue. The purpose of this request is to allow the single-family home to operate as a short-term rental unit.
Good afternoon, Commission. Location of the site, south side of Hillside Avenue between Beachview Street and Warwick Avenue. This is in the Bayview neighborhood. The site's a 4-bedroom, single-family home built in 2015, and the proposal is to allow a short-term rental, vacation rental. NFK 2050 designates the site as sustained coastal, single-unit residential is a primary use. Zoning is RC, residential coastal. In this district, a CUP is required for a short-term rental with more than 3 bedrooms. Here's a picture of the site. The property will be managed by Evolved, and the applicant has provided an individual that can fulfill the emergency contact requirement. The applicant does have experience with short-term or long-term rentals in Richmond and Norfolk, and work experience with a property management company. The applicant did receive one violation in 2024 with operating without a permit. Here's a picture of the backyard pool. The fence you see in the picture to the right does not currently meet the pool barrier requirement. There is a missing panel. As a condition, the applicant will be required to obtain a pool barrier building permit and maintain compliance with all aspects of that permit. For neighbor analysis, within 500 feet, 71% of parcels are single-family and 20% of residential units are single-family. If approved, 5% of residential parcels and 1% of residential units within 500 feet would be short-term rentals. Staff recommends approval. Again, that pool barrier permit we discussed will be required before operating and then a 2-year expiration. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. I think we do have the applicant here, Ms. Kane. Would you come up and say your name and your address? I know I do have a question for you.
Sure. Excuse me, I'm got a sinus infection. Elizabeth Kane, and that's 1229 Hillside Avenue. I'm sorry, what other information do you need?
What city is that?
Oh, in Norfolk.
In Norfolk. Oh,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Looking for the right one. Could you tell me more about the listing error?
The one in the past?
In 24, mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we just had it listed on Airbnb for a couple months, and we're aware of the process.
And it's not been used as a short-term rental since?
No, well, right now I've got, not short-term, but mid-term rental.
I gotcha, okay. And who is the, who's going to be managing the property?
Evolve.
Evolve, awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions for Ms. Kane? All right, thank you very much
Sure,
for coming
thank
out. Any discussion before we vote? I think we're ready.
Motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit request, subject to the conditions in the staff report. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
Ms. Sutter?
Aye, we'll make that recommendation to council. Thank you for coming out.
The next item on today's agenda is Beck Property Holdings, LLC, for a conditional use permit to operate a short-term rental, vacation rental at 2410 Aspen Street. The purpose of this request is to allow the single-family home to operate as a short-term rental unit.
Well, again, location site's the east side of Aspen Street between Larkin Street and Denver Avenue. This is in the Sherwood Forest neighborhood. It's currently a 3-bedroom, single-family home built in 1940, and proposes to allow the operation of a vacation rental, short-term rental. Proposed use does not conflict with NFK 2050, designates the site as sustained suburban. Zoning is SF10, single-family 10 suburban. All vacation rentals in this district require a CUP regardless of bedroom count. Here's a picture of the site. Under the current owner, the site did operate as a homestay under administrative permit from 2022 to 2024. No issues were received then. The property owner has moved to a nearby city and wishes to operate as a vacation rental. The property will be self-managed, and the only improvement requesting is additional foundation screening. Within 500 feet, 74% of parcels are single-family and 76% of residential units are single-family. If approved, 1% of residential parcels and 1% of residential units within 500 feet would be short-term rentals. And staff recommends approval, subject to conditions of staff report with a 2-year term. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. We do have the applicant here, William Beck. Would anyone like to ask Mr. Beck any questions? Would you like to add anything to the presentation? Okay. All right, I think we're ready to vote.
Motion is to recommend approval of the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
Ms. Sutter?
Aye, we'll make that recommendation to council. Thank you for coming out.
On to new business. We have the James Barry Robinson Home for Boys Trust for a development certificate 443 Kempsville Road.
Thanks, Rob. Location of the site's to the northeast of the Interstate 264 and Interstate 64 interchange, west of Kempsville Road, and proposed to allow development certificate for the construction of a new building in the Barry Robinson Center campus. As a background, the Barry Robinson Center provides educational and residential treatment programs for military-connected youth. NFK designates the site as innovation and production. Institutional is the primary use there. Zoning is INC, institutional campus. Development certificate is required for new principal structures and substantial improvements in the INC district. This slide is an aerial map of the campus. The red dot you see in that picture, that is the location of the new building. It is not visible from the interstate or Kempsville Road. And I will turn it over to Faith for the ARP segment.
Good afternoon again. The photos of the slide right now are just some of the existing buildings on campus. One is original building from the 1930s, and then the other one is a more modern building from the 1980s expansion. So here's the existing site layout. The new building will be situated in the southeastern part of the campus near the recreation building and education building and an existing basketball court. There's also an existing parking area, a driveway, and sidewalks. And then here's the proposed plan. It will note that the number of parking spaces depicted on this is inaccurate. There will be 2 parking spaces and not the 6 or 7 that's depicted there. The building will have an L-shaped footprint and will be located behind the recreation building, aligned to its orientation. A shared courtyard space will be created around an existing oak tree, and the current sidewalk will be extended to the new building's entrance, and the existing sidewalk in this area will be replaced. And then here's another proposed site plan. Then here's the proposed northwest elevation and west elevation. The 1-story building will have a front gable roof and brick cladding with a main body brick and an accent brick. And then the south elevation and southeast elevation. The bricks will be laid in a Flemish bond to match the 1930s campus buildings, and the accent brick will be incorporated around the windows and entrances and will have a soldier course header. And then here's a floor plan. And then here are some renderings of the front elevation. And then a rendering of the rear. And then these next 2 slides are some bird's eye view. And then these are proposed material palette. The windows will be a Marvin Ultimate aluminum clad 6/6 with window trim, gutters, and the storefront painted to match the existing campus finishes. And the roof will be a standing seam roof in slate gray. And AIRB recommended approval on a vote of 7-0. This project supports the Celebrating Our Community pillar, and the new building is integrated into the campus. Its space is unobtrusive and will not be visible from Kentsville Road. And the design of the new building complements the existing campus buildings, drawing inspiration from the original 1930s structures, while using 2 brick tones, and the new metal roof introduces a more modern design that distinguishes it as a new building.
Any questions? Thank you.
Staff as well recommends approval of the development certificate. And as a reminder, there are no waivers, so you have the final vote for the certificate. Any questions?
Any questions? Any discussion before we vote? I think we're ready.
The motion is to approve the development certificate. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
Ms. Sutter?
Aye.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to initiate a zoning ordinance text amendment to define the data center use and apply applicable performance standards.
Hello again. Based on the feedback from this month's mid-month presentation on data centers, staff is requesting initiation of a text amendment. This allows us to conduct additional research and hopefully come back with you with a proposed text amendment, define the data center use, and then create additional performance standards. Any questions?
Any questions?
All right.
Motion is to initiate the text amendment. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
And Ms. Sutter?
Aye.
I can do it.
I'll do it because I'm going to be next.
The next item on the agenda is to initiate a zoning ordinance text amendment to establish and modify use categories and performance standards for marijuana businesses in compliance with state code provisions.
Planning Commission, I'm going to do my Rob impression since he did the cannabis presentation for you, and I have the next item, so I'm just going to roll right into it. As you know, Rob provided a detailed presentation on some of the potential concerns coming up with the legislation that was approved in the general and the governor's budget regarding the marijuana use and the additional uses that were created. We want to continue to do the work, so the request is to initiate the text amendment for us to come back with a proposal to add the appropriate uses and performance standards in the zoning ordinance for those uses.
Questions? I think we're ready.
Motion is to initiate the text amendment. Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
And Ms. Sutter?
Aye.
Okay. Going back to continued agenda item number 2, City Planning Commission for the following applications. A zoning text amendment to the Norfolk zoning ordinance to create an overlay district that restricts the application process for new short-term rental units, vacation rentals. And B, to change of zoning to properties in the Willoughby area of the city to apply the overlay district.
Thank you, Rob. Commissioners, as we've noted, there's been a lot of work done since May as we've worked through with the commission's guidance on creating this district that was initially started at the request of the Willoughby Civic League to limit the number of short-term rentals in the Willoughby area due to concerns of their impacts on the community. So this action will create the short-term rental limitation overlay, which will limit the ability to operate or apply for short-term rentals, vacation rentals in the Willoughby area of the city, as well as a rezoning to apply those regulations. Please note that this does not impact homestays, so if this is a person's primary residence, they are still permitted to obtain approval, similar to what is currently allowed in the zoning ordinance. This only applies to vacation rentals. All existing vacation rentals with this proposed text amendment would allow for those that exist now to reapply through an administrative approval process. There are currently a mixture of those that are approved utilizing a conditional use permit, as well as the administrative process, and that varied depending on the number of bedrooms. All of those would get switched over to an administrative approval process. I will note, and this will require a motion of the commission to amend the text. The published text noted a mark on the wall of June 1st, 2026 as the cutoff for those that were approved. Staff has reviewed the number of applications that have come in since June 1st and to today, and there are 7 short-term rentals, vacation rentals, that were all renewals that came in after June 1st. And to assure that we meet the intent of what was discussed with the community, as well as the operators, we want to make sure that we capture all of those renewals in the process. No new vacation rentals were approved in that time frame that did not have a previous approval. So staff does recommend to change the date to August 27th, which is today, and that covers these 7 that were renewed after June 1st to be captured underneath the provisions to encapsulate them in the existing district. What will happen is after those that existed from that time frame are captured, there will be a 300-foot buffer placed around all of those and any future ones that are approved. Any property that is located outside of the 300-foot buffer that is single-family or two-family would be permitted to operate as a short-term rental through an administrative approval process. Okay. Additional language is added to enforcement. There is 4 found violations, not complaints, but 4 inspected and verified violations of a property would disqualify a property from being utilized as a vacation rental for 2 years. This is a clarification on the existing language that is on the books. There is currently a 3 strikes rule that was a bit more harsh than this. We believe stepping back into a more definable role where we can then also identify and notify people that they will be, or operators, that there will be consequences to further violations, this is a clarification that would be necessary. I will note that through our discussions and other notes that we provided and anecdotal reviews, much of the operations and violations do not come from the operators. It does come from those that are legally operating. They are coming from those that are illegally operating. This is a snapshot in time that was provided to you from the May list of short-term rental operators. We note that this is the location with the 300-foot buffer. Outside of this buffer, there are 41 single-family homes that are eligible to apply, and 3 duplexes that are eligible to apply to continue to operate as a vacation rental. Please note that once a property obtains an administrative approval, they become part of the buffer, and so the 300 feet is measured from there, and it does begin to exclude additional properties. So it does not mean that 41 could become one. It just means that 41 are currently eligible at this time. We received multiple comments from the community as well as the short-term rental operators. The Willoughby Civic League prefers an administrative-only process. As we note, the staff started with a hybrid process before it was changed at the direction of the Planning Commission. They did note that they would like to have the previous approval, CUP and administrative, to go through an administrative process, no new multifamily properties to become vacation rentals, and a 300-foot buffer, which they had revised from their previous request of a 500-foot buffer. The short-term rental operators prefer a hybrid approach where there is an opportunity for special circumstances to be reviewed. They do agree with the administrative renewal process for CUP and administrative. They had discussed in a written correspondence that they wanted a 100-foot buffer for administrative approvals and for conditional use permits requests for everything that's within 100 feet of another operator. Staff does recommend approval of the text as presented. It does align with NFK 2050, Celebrating Community Goal 1, which calls for the preservation of neighborhood character while also allowing for the continuation of existing short-term rentals to support visitors in the coastal area. Additional discussions detailing enforcement are to continue with the community and operators about short-term rentals, as well as community-wide violations or operational issues that are existing now. We do realize that there's additional information that needs to be provided regarding enforcement, and we want to continue those discussions to make sure that we provide a transparent and open discussion and understanding of how enforcement works. We began those conversations with the community and the operators. We need to continue them so that we can, in good faith, continue to work together.
Thank you, Director Tan. Any questions? All right, thank you very much. We do have lots of people who are here to speak and some who have selected not to speak. So what I'd like to do is first call the names of those who have come out as proponents of this amendment, and I'll call you by name. And that I'll start with Catherine McLean. Thank you for coming out. Elizabeth, I'm going to say Daugello. Thank you very much. I have a complicated last name too, I get it. Miss Leanne Ewell, thank you for coming out. Robert Wick, thank you very much. Donna Taylor. Philip Chisholm. James Madison, thank you. Melanie Whitehead, thank you. Jimmy Sullivan. Thank you. Gilda Nickenshad, thank you very much. Valerie Black, thank you. Earl Marie Latimer. Rosemary Holmes. T.L. Holmes. Linda Harrell. James McLean. Judy West. Kim Bariner. Danielle Casino. Dawn Nealer. Billy Hartley. Bill Small. And Joan Tipton. Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming out today. Those were the folks that were proponents and chose not to speak. I will call the names of two proponents, Rusty West and then Diane Kerball. Okay. Did you want to speak, though, as an opponent? Okay. Change that for me. Mr. West, if you would, please, start with your name and your address. And we do have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Rusty West. I live at 1216 West Ocean View Avenue in Norfolk, Willoughby section. I am the president of the Willoughby Civic League. I want to begin by recognizing the thoughtful, time-intensive work you have put into this short-term proposal. Your approach has consistently shown a desire to be fair, balanced, and deliberate for all parties involved. To respect your time and the effort you've already invested, I will be the only speaker for the proponents today. I ask that those here in support of the Willoughby proposal please stand. Thank you. We support this proposal for several clear and important reasons. First, the 300-foot linear buffer is a true compromise. The distance provides meaningful relief from the high density of STRs in Willoughby. It prevents additional clustering and gives our neighborhood the breathing room it has needed for years. Second, every current STR, every single one, will be eligible to be grandfathered under this proposal. No one is being pushed out. No one is losing their ability to operate because of past investment. The proposal protects the existing operators while still addressing the long-standing density concerns. Third, shifting initial and renewal approvals to the administrative permits is a major improvement for both the city and Strive. It removes the cost and complexity of the CUP process and gives both current and future STR operators a clear and more predictable path to compliance. Fourth, the four-strike enforcement system adds fairness to everyone. It gives operators multiple opportunities to correct issues, and it gives the city a structured, transparent way to address violations. This is a balanced approach that supports responsible operators while protecting residents. Commissioners, we sincerely appreciate your patience, your engagement, and your willingness to listen throughout this process. You have taken the time to understand our neighborhood's unique challenges, and this proposal reflects that understanding. We respectfully ask that you approve this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. West. Any questions for Mr. West? Well, I thank you for participating, you and all of you, during this whole process.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next, we'll have the opponents. Okay, we do have two folks who are opposed, who do not wish to speak. I'll call their names. David Flores. Christina Nash. Thank you very much for coming out. And then we do have folks who are here to speak as opponents. And I'll call Ms. Diane, and I think I might have mispronounced it earlier. Is it Cabral?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. If you would please start with your name and your address when you come up.
Diane Cabral, 1540 Chella Avenue, Norfolk. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Sutherth and Commissioners. Show us the money. Airbnb is just one of 6 short-term rental platforms where short-term rental properties are rented in the city of Norfolk. Airbnb alone submits more than $3.4 million annually in tax revenue since 2022. That's over $15 million, not including the recent 2026 tax increase, which quadrupled my guest taxes. STR guests spend between $800 to $1,500 daily at local businesses. STR support cleaners, tradespeople, restaurants, small businesses, and many other entities in the city. As Norfolk faces a $50 million budget deficit, restricting a major revenue generator is really counterproductive. My recent FOIA request for the tax revenue question remains unanswered, and I believe a second extension is expected from an email I just received. Why is it so hard to answer the question about how much short-term rental revenue is generated by our businesses? Why is it not a budget line item in the Norfolk City's budget? How does the public know? How do we know how that money is allocated and spent by the city? You're being asked to impose geographically targeted restrictions on lawful STRs in Willoughby Spit, wholly inside the Ocean View tourism zone and the Commonwealth designated tourism economic development zone. Before voting, I urge you to examine the data accuracy for these changes. The complaint data is not reliable. Again, in Broom versus Robinson, Norfolk's General District Court ruled that roughly 100 STR complaints were false, tortious business interference, and a misuse of government resources. Yet these same complaints were presented to this very commission as evidence for the need for more regulation, a serious data integrity problem. The city's data shows that the STR complaint system is broken from another FOIA request. I sent you the results of that spreadsheet earlier this morning. Out of 728 complaints, 513, or 71%, were false, unfounded, or not actionable. Of all of those complaints, 95, or 13%, were open violations. 79 of those were from unregistered STRs. There was one violation from a permitted short-term rental for a trash can, not the repeat felonies, murder, rape, prostitution that you see at Willoughby's motels. Same industry, we're both in lodging, we're in the same exact area. Why is there such unequal zoning regulation within the lodging industry? It doesn't make sense. This process discourages compliance, and I think it's only going to make the problem of unregistered operators worse. What's needed is weekend enforcement. Talk to your zoning inspector for Willoughby Spit. I did, and
3
he doesn't
minutes.
have any enforcement on the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Martina Patricio. Ms. Patricio, would you please start with your name and your address, please? Thank you.
My name is Martina Patricio, and my address is 1147 Little Bay Avenue, and I own short-term rentals located at 1353 and 1357 East Ocean View Avenue. I oppose any buffers in Willoughby. It will because it will prevent new STRs who will welcome military families, grandparents, parents, and kids who want a few quiet days by the bay. They walk on the beach, they grab ice cream, coffee, eat at our restaurants, and they shop locally. That keeps money in Willoughby Speed and supports our small businesses, housekeepers, and maintenance crews. I would love for us to have more short-term rentals, and also, to start advertising Norfolk as a peaceful, family-friendly spot on the Chesapeake. This kind of tourism helps residents and also helps the city.
Thank you very much for coming out. Robert Duncan. Again, your name and your address first, please.
Sure, my name is Robert Duncan. I reside at 1104 Toller Place. Good afternoon, guys. Hope you guys are doing well. I'm glad that this meeting's pretty short. I'm going to actually be able to go sailing today, which I'm looking forward to. That's one of the reasons why I decided to move to Willoughby and stay in Willoughby and stay in Norfolk. I'm here on behalf of some people that live on my street. I see that most of my people that live on my street, my neighbors, are over here. They are proponent for what you guys are trying to do, and I am actually somewhat for it as well. I think that there needs to be some kind of limits. It shouldn't be the Wild West. They shouldn't be everywhere. But I do not feel that 300 feet is fair and balanced. As you guys said, that there's about 40 locations that might be available if this goes through with 300 feet. If you add in another like 5 more STRs, that could probably pretty much envelop the rest of those 40 properties. We are doing something that Norfolk has not been able to do. I do commercial and industrial real estate, and I've tried to bring in Marriott. I've tried to bring in other people into the Spectrum, which is now a part of the staging for the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. I've tried to bring in boutique hotels and all of that, and unfortunately, there's not an interest in that. But what there is an interest is STRs and short-term rentals, and we're doing a really good job. 80% of the STRs that are in Norfolk actually have five-star reviews, and we don't have that with the hotels. So we're actually bringing a great product to Norfolk. People that can't be here that also live on my street, 1100, Brian and Nicole Jesse, they're my partners. They have STRs with me. 1102 Toller Place, Jeremy and Ashley Laws, they're 2 of my partners. 1104, which is my wife and I. 1136, Toller, Jeff and Karen, they're having some issues with medical things, and they've got their caregivers, they're working, they're professionals, and they can't be there. Most of the other people here are retired, and what it is about to me is about property rights. And also the fact that when I moved into the area, I bought something outside of an HOA, and this is like being in an HOA by having these rules and stuff put in on us. And I don't think that that's fair. So that's pretty much what I have to say. And thank you guys for the effort that you guys have actually put in on this. A lot of the stuff that you have put in is fair, but the 300 feet, I just don't think is. So that's what I have to say, and be thinking of you guys when I'm out on the water.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Cynthia Hall. After Ms. Hall will be Ms. Norris.
Here we go again. Cynthia Hall, 722 West Ocean View Avenue, Norfolk. 23503. Can I start now?
Please
Okay,
do.
Great. 8 years ago, planning decided to allow STRs. Since then, 11 changes have been made. Almost every single year, change has been made, even more. More than that, but these are the ones that directly affected me. You invest money in a house because suddenly you're allowed to have a quadruplex. You invest money, you get it. The next year, quadruplexes aren't allowed. What do? You delete one of your dwellings so that it's a triplex. What happens? Triplexes aren't allowed. I mean, again and again and again, that has happened. Here we go again, a new rule change. It does affect me greatly. The Civic League says, wherever it is, where's the Civic League one where they suggested the vote?
Could you maybe go back to that previous slide? I
Civic
think it
League
is.
said that they recommend all this stuff, 300 feet, whatever. There was no vote. You guys.
Oh, I'm
met.
sorry. Would you please speak into the microphone and to us, please?
Civic League
Thank you.
met with the city all summer. Not the Civic League, a few handful of people met, and now they have a recommendation. That's not the Civic League, that's a handful of people recommending something that affects us. Every single time a change is made, it really does affect people like me. Our little tiny piece of crap small business gets harmed greatly because a few people, a handful of people on Toller or somewhere don't like it. I was here last time about 1442 West Ocean View. It was legal, we bought it, the rules changed. The only way to keep it a short-term rental is to remove and replace 4 HVAC units at a cost of $68,000, too much money. Yes, we got in trouble and we paid our fines and we applied. All the owners said, we will go ahead and pay the HVAC. And you guys turned me down. Why? I don't know. I did pay my fine. I did go to court. I did what I was supposed to do. Now there's a rule change and I have no opportunity of ever getting a short-term rental in that house. Here is a list. These houses were on the courthouse steps 2 days ago. Foreclosure. If you look at when these were all sold, they were actually dumped in 2022 when the rule changed, saying that if you have an apartment, you can no longer operate as an STR without sprinklers. 2022, all of these houses were dumped, were transferred ownership, and I guess they went into bankruptcy. They were under foreclosure 2 days ago at the courthouse steps. I think that's what you guys would like to do with me, is add me to this list.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Ms. Norris, and then after Ms. Norris, Mr. Ricardo.
Hi, Sarah Norris, 1532 Willimantic Drive. I'm the Director of Operations for Host My Home. We are a short-term rental management company here in Hampton Roads, and as many of you know, we manage many properties here in Norfolk. I'll start with saying that if this does move forward, I agree that the buffer needs to be very carefully considered. The distance being proposed does not seem reasonable to me. But I think others will speak more specifically to that. While I can appreciate the city trying to find a middle ground, I've ultimately had a hard time understanding why and how we got to this point. I'm going to speak honestly. We all know there can be a negative perception surrounding short-term rentals, and we as operators feel it quite often. But I do think it's the city's responsibility to separate that perception from the actual facts when making a big decision such as this. The fact is, as stated during this initial presentation, that most of the major issues and complaints are not coming from legal, well-run short-term rentals. I've worked in property management for many years, and short-term rentals specifically are under a microscope in many cities and held to a higher standard than many other areas of property management and hospitality. The businesses that this change would directly impact are the ones that are operating legally, responsibly, and with a high level of oversight. And this change affects real people and real businesses. Short-term rentals support families. Family incomes bring income to local restaurants, businesses, provide jobs for cleaners, maintenance technicians, administrative staff, managers, inspectors, contractors, and other local vendors. So I think we really need to ask, why are we making this change, and what does this buffer actually change or resolve? If the majority of complaints aren't coming from legal, compliant short-term rentals, how does putting a buffer around those businesses actually fix the problem? It's not going to stop illegal short-term rentals. In fact, it could make that worse. It doesn't address hotel-related issues or long-term rental issues. What is it fixing? One of the biggest issues is enforcement. I think we all agree on that. Our focus should be on getting to the root of the actual problems and finding solutions that address those problems without unnecessarily impacting businesses that are operating legally and responsibly. One quick point I want to make based on something I experienced. I manage a property that's coming up for renewal, and we had a meeting with a different civic league. It was brought up that there were 3 complaints in 2023 and 2024. I pointed out that it was not a short-term rental during those years. It was actually a long-term rental. During those years, there were 3 complaints as a long-term rental. Since it has been a short-term rental since 2025, 0 violations. This is an important distinction because these misunderstandings happen often. Ultimately, legal, responsible short-term rentals shouldn't be penalized because of a negative perception or because of problems they aren't causing. We need to look at facts, identify where the problems are coming from, and create policies that address those problems rather than penalizing the businesses that are doing things the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Norris. And Cecilio Ricardo. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Cecilia Ricardo, 718 West Ocean View Avenue. From the beginning of this debate, I called what was happening to STR owners a witch hunt. Because in a witch hunt, you don't need evidence. You start with an accusation, find a guilty party, and then look for a reason to punish them. After the last public hearing, we were told the city residents and STR owners would collaborate on STR reform. We took that seriously. We participated in 5 meetings, brought information on solutions, and believed we were finally going to work toward a compromise. But most of our proposals were not incorporated, and we were shut out of the process after the 5th meeting. Instead, the city pivoted from an overlay restricting new STRs to a 300-foot buffer, which is pretty much the same thing. And here's the irony. As we went through this process, we actually found the evidence, and it doesn't support the accusations. We were told cities cause parties, trash, parking problems, raise rents, and reduce housing supply. Yet the city's own research shows STRs aren't responsible for almost all of those problems. According to Airbnb, STRs generate approximately $3.4 million in Airbnb tax revenue. We support local businesses, cleaners, contractors, and help restore neglected properties. So what exactly are we being punished for? We appreciate eliminating the restrictive cup requirements for duplexes and below, but that means little if the 300-foot buffer leaves virtually no opportunity for new STRs. I personally know a neighbor struggling financially who hoped to rent a room in her house to make ends meet, only to discover she's in the buffer zone, so it doesn't matter. That's why this still feels like a witch hunt. The evidence doesn't support the crime, but we're still being punished for it. And there are consequences. This debate has already created tremendous hostility in Ocean View. We've seen an STR house shot at and local residents sued for defamation and tortious inference. This buffer will only add fuel to that conflict. It will discourage investment, limit tourism, push more owners toward illegal STRs, the very problem the city was trying to eliminate. So I'm asking you, don't burn us at the stake for the crime that we never committed. Eliminate the buffer or reduce it to 100 feet. And if STRs aren't causing the problem alleged, what evidence really supports a 300-foot buffer? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have, and I apologize, I missed one of the signups. Leslie Nelson is here, but they are just observing. Thank you very much for coming out. So now we can go into our rebuttal phase, okay? So we did have one speaker for the opponents. Mr. West, we will ask you to come up if you'd like to speak to anything that was said before. And then of the folks who have spoken in opposition, will you please decide amongst yourself how you will divvy up the 5 minutes? And it is 5 minutes for both. Thank you very much. Mr. West?
The original request from Willoughby residents was simple, a complete overlay for all of Willoughby. Over time, through discussion, compromise, and your thoughtful guidance, we arrived at this proposal. It does not give STR operators everything they wanted, but it gives them options, real workable options, and it protects the residents who have carried the burden of STR growth for years. At the May 4th community meeting, STR operators expressed fear that they would lose the ability to operate their current investments. This proposal directly addresses that concern. Every existing STR remains eligible to continue operating. No one is losing what they already have. They also raise concerns about the cumbersome and costly cut process. This proposal eliminates that barrier and replaces it with a far simpler administrative purpose. That is the meaningful improvement for STR operators. Throughout this process, we have listened to the STR operators and owners. We have advocated for a path where both sides can walk away feeling that something fair and constructive has been accomplished. We also agree that enforcement needs an overhaul, better documentation, clearer transparency, and stronger tools that apply equally to long-term renters, short-term renters, and homeowners. We remain committed to working with the city toward that goal. But fairness is not one-sided. STR operators have said that this proposal is unfair. We ask you to consider what many homeowners have lived with and what they feel is unfair. Is it fair to buy a home in what was once a quiet, stable community only to find yourself surrounded by more STRs than neighbors? Is it fair to plan your retirement in Willoughby expecting to know and trust the people living around you only to watch a revolving door of STRs move closer and closer to your home? Is it fair to walk out your front door and see 2 STRs facing your driveway where long-term neighbors once lived? When do we acknowledge what is fair to the residents who built this community, maintain it, and live with the consequences of unchecked STR density every single day? Commissioners, as you make your decision today, we ask you to consider the fairness in its full context. Keeping things exactly as they are is the most unfair outcome for Willoughby residents. This proposal is the first meaningful step towards balance. We believe your work already reflects that understanding. We respectfully ask you to approve this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. Now for the opposition. You may, but 5 minutes is the total amount. Okay. And if the second person could be making their way up as well, that would be great. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. I'm kind of surprised that we're here right now, given all of the information that's been shared with the Planning Commission. But one thing that has not really been discussed, and I've reviewed all of the meetings, I've attended most of the hearings, and the different information that's been shared by the Planning Department with the Planning Commission, is that the Ocean View Tourism District was created by the city in May of 2017. It was voted in unanimously by City Council. Half of those City Council members are still sitting on the council today. The city took the additional step of filing for approval for Ocean View to be recognized as a specially designated Commonwealth of Virginia Economic Development Zone for tourism. Norfolk only has 3 such zones, and there are only 70 across the entire state. Short-term rentals completely fit within NFK 2050. I recently read through the 2026 brochure by the Economic Development Authority, which talked about the importance of tourism as being the third leg of a 3-legged stool to bring in revenue for the city. There are simply not options in Willoughby Spit that are safe, hospitable, and welcoming for our visitors other than the short-term rentals. Our visitors rely on our businesses as a safe place to stay. Twice in the last year, I've had a short-term rental guest approach me. I don't take same-day rentals, but because I have a quadplex, my number is listed, and they reached out personally and asked me if they could stay at my house because they were staying at a local motel, and there was a shooting one time and a fight where somebody was literally punching through the wall. They were worried for their families. I have contacted those 2 guests to see if they'd be willing to write a letter or do anything to support our cause. I was clearly told they want nothing to do with Norfolk. They don't want their name on anything, and they consider Norfolk to be the armpit of America and completely unsafe. This makes it really hard to operate in the city of Norfolk, where I choose to operate, in this tourism district. And I hope the city will consider that when you look at the lodging industry, we're in the same industry. Why is the regulation and why is the enforcement so unequal? Why is it so hard to answer the questions about revenue generation and how much money is generated through short-term rental taxes, which were quadrupled this year? My last comment is regarding the Willoughby Civic League. This Planning Commission and the City Council have been notified more than 40 times now that the Willoughby Civic League took an illegal vote in February that was not noticed, was not on an agenda, and that the short-term rental operators that are part of the Willoughby Civic League were not noticed of that vote. We were declined the opportunity to participate. Furthermore, according to its bylaws and constitution, the Willoughby Civic League should be having votes before the membership before they go into any discussion with a governmental body. All I know is that we're in summer hiatus. I was unaware that all of these discussions were happening with the Willoughby Civic League. It wasn't the membership as a whole. It was a group of people that happen to live in Willoughby Spit, but it wasn't on behalf of the membership of the Willoughby Civic League.
I just want to talk to the idea of the density being so crazy with the short-term rentals. I understand they talked about, there was a plan in 1998 to limit some of the rentals out there. And yeah, that's right. There's 70% of the rentals are long-term rentals, and that is the character of our neighborhood. When they talk about, let's fix the character of the neighborhood, you should probably consider looking at the majority of the neighborhood, which is 70% rentals. We only make up 3%, or by their standards, 7%. Regardless of that, it's still less than 10%. How do we affect the character? All we're doing is 2 or 3% trying to make a living and just trying to take care of the neighborhoods. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone coming out and speaking your piece. I'm actually really encouraged that so many folks are participating in this discussion and have been over many meetings. So again, I thank you. Now, I'd like to ask our commission, do we have any questions for our staff? Any points of discussion before we go into a vote?
I have one question. There was a comment made about a homestay opportunity. Is there any mention in this about limiting homestay options?
No, the regulations only address vacation rentals. So if this is someone's primary residence, they can still operate under the existing homestay rules.
And does that mean that, I believe someone mentioned that if they wanted to rent one of the rooms in their home, that is a homestay and that would still be allowable?
That is correct. And I apologize, I need to
That's okay.
make sure I've got the right information in my head.
Just have to shift gears.
For the homestays, it is similar, depending on the number of bedrooms, it is permitted by right or by conditional use permit. That is not changing as long as it is their primary residence.
Thank you. We're actually not going to take any more questions or comments. Thank you, though. From the audience, rather. Commissioners, any other questions or points of discussion?
Regarding the enforcement topic, I know you said those discussions are just starting. Is there anything from like the weekend enforcement that can be expanded upon now?
Yes, Mr. Pendleton. So we do have on-call zoning inspectors. We're currently dealing with a number of other significant issues across the city, dealing with late-night operations. We have, we do have the availability for them to address a short-term rental if necessary. However, again, as we've noted before, from those that are legally operating, we're not observing any significant issues from those that legally operate, which means most of our violations are handled during the weekday when we find that people are inappropriately listing or illegally operating. That's how we handle most of our violations. But as discussed previously, we do need to step up enforcement in Willoughby, generally, not just zoning, but also code enforcement, which is part of further discussions that we'll bring back to the community as well as the Planning Commission.
And then no matter how today's vote go or how it goes in front of council, the increase in enforcement is going to happen. No matter-
That is the direction that staff has been requested by the Planning Commission. I believe that's also the request that we have from council members as well, at least in this area to start with. Again, zoning enforcement is a small piece of that, so we have to make sure that we're bringing everybody along to assure that we're doing that. So.
Other questions?
Comment and a question. Hear me? Okay. There was lots of data points discussed today, and honestly, I think in the last couple months we've been talking about this. We've all learned a lot about the data. And I want to make sure that whatever the vote goes, that we make a commitment to the community to continue to assess that data and maybe perhaps put something in, in this decision to track that and to be able to bring back to the community some, revised data and let everybody make a determination of what that data means, or, be able to reveal that information to folks. So I don't know that we need to define that specifics of that data today, but Mr. Don, would that be something that we could put forth in this process?
Yes, sir. Staff commits to bringing back the data and information, analyzing what this change may impact in the Willoughby area, as well as short-term rentals across the city, to the retreat and in a year for the Planning Commission, so that we can have 1 year of a season to analyze what changes. So at the October retreat in 2027, staff will bring back that information to you.
And I just will say for purposes of this discussion, there are a lot of communities that are trying to address the density issue, and there is no crystal ball, there is no magic data element that can decide this in its entirety. So I think whatever we decide is something I feel is a compromising solution that doesn't necessarily mean it's forever. And I think the opportunity should be presented in a year once we look at that data to determine was it too restrictive or was it not restrictive enough, and what those impacts are. So, perhaps we just have this same conversation a year from now and really decide, did we get it right or do we need to tweak it? And I think that's the beauty of this, what we're discussing here today. So.
I do have a comment.
Please do.
As well. We just went through a tremendous master plan that took Norfolk 2030 and made it Norfolk 2050. 400-page document. It was recognized by the Commonwealth as one of the top planning documents in the whole region. So there's a tremendous amount of study that goes into this. I'm a little upset to hear that in 8 years we've changed the SDRs 11 times. I'm not sure. We're going to look into that and see if that's even true. But one of the documents that we've put together is still a work in progress. So we're trying, as Mr. Bateman says, we're trying to do the best we possibly can. And within Hampton Roads, the other municipalities are looking at Norfolk as one of the leaders in the handling of STRs. So it's not an exact science. We're trying our best. We hear what's going on within the civic leagues. We hear what's going on within those that have short-term rentals. We'll continue to listen, and we'll continue to work this through. We don't want to actually change this every year either. It doesn't make sense for us as well. So within a year's time, if we have the data and we're able to look this back, perhaps it's not the legal short-term rentals, it's the illegal ones that are the biggest violators, and we'll have to make sure we're watching over that. Bear with us as we bear with you.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Well, I also wanted to share that this change is not intended to punish. It's more about a very delicate balance, and we're kind of skating that line, and we're happy to continue to work with all of you. And this wasn't ever an either or a resident versus short-term rental. It was a both and. Our goal all along was to make sure that we talk through the concentration of short-term rentals, as well as talk about something that isn't really measured very often, and that's residential sense of place, where folks know their neighbors, and also balancing, again, knowing your neighbor with having a lot of turnover as a neighbor. And so right now, again, not to demonize anyone, and hopefully, once we have the data by next year, maybe we could dispel some of these misconceptions. And so again, Mr. Wells, I think you said it perfectly. Bear with us as we bear with you. This is an iterative process, and this is not the end of the conversation. My understanding is that we're stepping up enforcement, and we're keeping a watchful eye and welcoming all comments as we go through this together. If there aren't any more comments or questions, I think we might be ready to vote.
Madam Chair, staff had
Yes.
discussed the
Yes, no, you're
changing
right.
of the date for the
Thank you for the reminder.
eligibility.
I do move that we change the effective date from June 1st to August 27th.
Second.
Let me clarify, that would be the date of what is considered an active approval. or active-
Absolutely,
yes.
active approval. I'll say that again, active approval. I move that we change the active approval date from June 1st to August 27th.
Second.
Okay, the motion is to modify the text in the amendment for the active zoning approval date from June 1st, 2026 to August 27th of 2026. I have way too many papers up here now.
That's okay.
Dr. Whibley?
We do recycle though, don't we?
Dr. Whibley?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
Aye.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
Aye.
And Ms. Sutter?
Aye.
Okay. So the motion is to recommend approval of the zoning text amendment, subject to the modification as for the eligibility and approval of the rezoning of properties in the Willoughby area to apply the overlay district. Dr. Whibley?
I also would like to thank staff for all their time, and obviously the community. I think it's time for a pause. I look forward to in a year having some real information, and most of all, I think we hear consistently is enforcement is really the answer here. Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Pendleton?
No.
Ms. Van?
Aye.
Mr. Bateman?
I just want to say also, I was in the room with the community members and the Strive Group representatives, and we started the conversation. One side was at 500 square feet and the other was at 100 square feet. So I'll take responsibility for bringing it to the middle. Again, everyone had an opportunity to recommend we go slightly one way or the other. But as I mentioned before, this is where we stand, and this is what we're going to go with for this, if it gets approved by council. So I recommend aye.
You don't mean square feet, you mean buffer.
Buffer, sorry. Buffer.
And Ms. Sutter?
I vote aye. Thank you all very much for coming out, and we are adjourned.